Paula, thanks for joining me. Let's talk about Clove. Can you walk us through the moment you realized there was a need for a specialized footwear in healthcare? Very interesting. How that led to the creation of Clove.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think it's interesting. A lot of my family's in healthcare. So my sister is a pharmacist, and growing up, I remember I was in high school and she had just started working, and she would come home after these long shifts in the pharmacy where she's standing 10, 12 hours and walking 10, 15,000 steps, and her feet would be so sore at the end of the day. She would hold a foot massager, like a back massager, to her feet to try and kind of alleviate some of that pain. So I sort of knew that this was an issue. I met my co-founder. He was in the Wharton MBA program at the time. I was working in venture, and his wife was a nurse, and they had just moved from New York. And in New York, she was required to wear Dansko clogs, which is kind of like this hard clog. It's fairly popular in healthcare. But not really comfortable, not really designed for standing and walking. People get something they call Dansko ankle, which is the walker run in the ankle or in the clog, and because there's no ankle support, they'll turn their ankle. So she had moved and was buying a bunch of different pairs of shoes. And there were issues with all of them. Either they weren't comfortable, or they weren't easy to clean, or and so it was kind of like, well, why isn't somebody making a product for this market? So Joe kind of turned to me and said, hey, what do you think about making a shoe for healthcare? I was like, that's a great idea. This is a group of people that are shoe super users, right? They're walking a marathon a week. They're on their feet. I think folks that have a desk job, we don't really necessarily understand what it's like to actually be standing for that long. And so it was definitely kind of an underserved market, and we wanted to bring something to them that would really kind of meet their specific and special needs. So that was kind of the genesis of the idea. It really came out of seeing the healthcare people in our life, and kind of appreciating the pain points, literally, of their existing footwear.
How did you approach the research and development process to ensure Clove shoes actually met the needs of healthcare professionals?
Yeah, I mean, we didn't take anything for granted. I think people sometimes can underinvest in sort of these initial steps of really making sure that they understand, what it is that a customer needs out of a product. So we knew comfort was a given, right? Like, we knew it had to be a comfortable shoe. The first thing we did actually was we did a huge survey. So obviously we talked to folks in our life that worked in healthcare, and we kind of got what their pain points were with existing shoes. But we actually did a massive survey, and put it up on Facebook, and promoted it to try and get people to click. And I think we had 300 or 400 responses. It was basically like, tell us about your existing footwear. What's the most important thing for you as a healthcare worker? And then the survey responses were actually kind of interesting. So easy to clean, we knew would be important. That actually ended up being the number one most important thing. The interesting thing is people mentioned comfort a lot. They didn't rank it at the top, but they mentioned it. And so we kind of knew just based on that, like, oh, like this, it has to be comfortable or they're not going to wear it, right? Like, that was the number one thing. So ensuring that it was a comfortable shoe, but also easy to clean. Non-slip was another thing that came up a lot because, folks are giving patients baths. They're, encountering all kinds of fluids in sort of the daily job. So it had to be a non-slip. Easy to get on and off because people will sit like at the nurse station and they'll kick their shoes off, and then a code will come in and they'll have to run and rapid respond and get the shoe on really quickly. So that was another one. So we kind of had all these sort of feature sets, and we had people rank them, and got really a clear picture of what a perfect healthcare shoe would look like. And we took that survey work and we handed it directly to our designer and said, okay, here's exactly the specifications of what this shoe need to do. And it really drove a lot of the decision points that we made. So, like, for example, the shoe is made out of a synthetic leather called Clarino. So it's a product out of Japan. It has the same microstructure as leather, but it's completely impervious to fluids. It's easy to clean. You can wipe it down with like a bleach wipe that you would find, like a hospital grade bleach wipe. And so it's resistant to abrasion, and it's a really durable material. So we knew that was kind of the first sort of decision point. We also have a tongueless construction. So it's a unibody design, so there's no opportunity for fluid to get inside the shoe. We've got kind of a sock fit liner, neoprene liner, so you can slide it on and off. Obviously non-slip outsole, designed to kind of channel fluid away. We rolled the edges of our shoe to make sure that fluid couldn't get in there, right? So like anywhere that there's a seam or a pattern like that, we use waterproof laces, waterproof stitching. So there were a lot of decision points like that around the technical aspects. And then we did a ton of research on comfort. So we talked to a bunch of podiatrists. We did a lot of work around, what does it mean for a shoe to be comfortable, right? And so we came up with sort of this set of specifications. And it's actually really funny. A couple of years later, we were talking to an executive at Nike and sort of describing the shoe. And he was like, yeah, you guys figured out what it took us $18 million and 6 months of time and investment to figure out like what is the best shoe for standing and walking. So we spent a really lot of time about being very thoughtful about that, right? So making sure the shoe has a wide toe box, right? So your foot has room to spread out, zero drop shoe, making sure that you use EVA foam that's, soft but not too soft, right? You want to make sure the foot has support. So we did a lot of work around that up front. And then once we kind of had that final design spec, we actually did a clinical trial at Penn Medicine. So Joe and I, my co-founder, went and we went through Roy Rosen, who's the chief innovation officer at Penn Medicine, who was a contact I had through Venture. And we actually found a group of nurses. I think there were 12 people in the original trial, and we actually had them wear the shoe. And Joe and I went and we fitted them. And it was it's the cutest thing because we met an amazing nurse called Ashley Newberry, and she was just the funniest. And people thought we were shoe salespeople. So they had no idea who we were, like had no context. And so they would come and we'd like fit them and get them the shoe. And now we laugh about it because Ashley's always texting us. I saw another pair of Cloves. I can't believe it. So that was like almost 6 years ago at this point. Then we took that initial feedback from that and then kind of incorporated it into the final design. So yeah, we've always been very, very thoughtful about that, and it's always been kind of the most important thing is making sure that we put out a product that we're proud of and also that kind of meets the needs of healthcare professionals. We always say healthcare is a really hard job. We want to make it easier. Healthcare is hard. Footwear doesn't have to be. And so that's always kind of been our job is sort of doing all the research and then making sure we're giving them a product that they don't have to think about, right? They can just buy it and know that it's going to do exactly what they need it to do.
That Nike executive's comment got me curious now. As a lifelong student of innovation and figuring out unique insights, how do you figure out something Nike spent $18 million to figure out? Like, what is the secret to do that as a new startup?
Yeah, it's funny. I think, and Joe will say this, we're very tenacious. I think, I think the key is, and this I would say is true about entrepreneurship in general, there is no textbook where you can go and point to something and say, okay, this is exactly the rule book that you need to follow and you will be successful. It's, even the best entrepreneurs have at best a 50% hit rate. And so you really have to do kind of the legwork and talk to people and start to understand, what are the things you don't know? What are the things you need to learn more about, right? And kind of, it's just a lot of like getting on the phone and talking to people and making sure that you understand, right? So like getting in contact with the right folks and having conversations around topics. Like neither of us had ever done footwear before, which when we tell people that, it's like blows their minds of like, oh, you went from this to shoe with having never done footwear. But I think the reality is that we were good researchers, good at synthesizing information and good at kind of talking to people and sort of getting an understanding of things that we didn't understand before. I think, as you're going through your entrepreneurship journey, like having that opportunity to talk to people and learn about things that you don't know about is like absolutely key, right? Because you're not going to have a good understanding of everything. So yeah, it was interesting. I think we were very data driven in the early days and still are today. And so I think that was an important part of it is making sure that we were doing survey work, that we were doing the research, that we were talking to experts in footwear, and just being very tenacious about the whole thing, where, we would spend hours and hours, weeks and weeks trying to get people to talk to us, calling different people, giving each other a report out. Oh, I spoke to so-and-so and here's what they said. And I talked to this person, and here's what they said. So we put the time really in the investment in making sure that we were talking to the right people and understanding what they were saying to us. So.
Well, I need to keep drilling in here as a early stage entrepreneur myself. Just talk to a lot of people, right? So like people say this, talk to a lot of people, learn from them, listen. But as a you said you talked to a lot of podiatrists. So how do you get on the phone even? Like, hey, we're building a new shoe. Like, what is it? Like, let's get dirty here a little bit. Like,
As a venture capitalist, I learned the beauty of the cold and warm intro. I mean, we obviously use our network. I have family in healthcare, but even beyond that, it was just like anybody that would talk to us, right? So like we would email people and say, hey, like we're trying to do this thing, like, and you would be shocked with how willing people are and to be free with their time. Like we would email folks that I would think, oh, this person's never going to respond to us, and they would get back to us and yeah, happy to hop on the phone with you. You'd be like, wait, really? So I think if you kind of lead from a place of authenticity, which is to say, hey, I'm an entrepreneur, I'm really interested in this, like, can you help me? I think you'd be pretty surprised with how willing people are to do that. I know now, certainly, I try and pay that back. So when folks reach out to me, I'm always happy to answer questions and get on the phone. So yeah, I think you just kind of have to get after it.
Paula, I was checking out the press on your site. It looks like Clove has received significant attention, awards. How did you build? I mean, it's 20. It's been 5 years.
Yeah.
2019. Now it's
Yeah.
2024. Time goes by fast, right? So, like, how did you build brand awareness in the early stages, and what kind of marketing strategies have been the most effective for you?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's interesting. Really early stage, like we were, I think it was, the importance of PR can't be overstated. I think it's an interesting thing where you're kind of constantly investing time into it, and the yield is very different. And the articles that you think are going to work, or maybe not the ones that do eventually end up working. But I think we got really, we were fortunate in that one of the very first articles that was written about us was Fast Company, and they put us an article that mentioned also Crocs and Allbirds. We went in person and met with Liz, who was the journalist, and had this really amazing conversation with her about what are the unique challenges of healthcare footwear, and kind of all this sort of detail about us and who we were. And that initial article, I think, was probably one of our most successful PR pieces. So I think that as a strategy, especially in consumer products, is really important. I mean, you can't really understate the importance of that for sort of brand trust, brand awareness, kind of making sure, because that's something that, somebody sees an article like that, even if they're not a healthcare worker, they'll send it to, their friends, their family, their, so-and-so is a nurse. So I think early days that, those first couple of Fast Company articles were huge for us, and drove a ton of traffic to our site, like right when we were first launching. So that was the big thing for us, kind of early days. And then obviously traditional channels of digital marketing. And I think what's interesting about our business that's very different from other companies is that we have a ton of word of mouth, and that's because most healthcare workers kind of work in close proximity. And so we sort of knew that we had to get it right from the very first touch, right? We had to make sure that, customers were happy and would be, very willing to tell their friends about Clove and how great. Oh, look at these new sneakers I got. They're amazing. You should try it out. So we knew that was going to be really important. So we're very thoughtful about the customer journey and the kind of customer service that we were providing, and all of those things. Kind of trying to make sure that we had, both the right product, but also the right experience to kind of drive some of that word of mouth, which I think was really, really important early on when no one knew who we were, and marketing's expensive. So really making sure that you can kind of take some of your early adopters and turn them into brand enthusiasts.
Clove seems to have a strong emotional connection with your audience. How did you cultivate and maintain that relationship with the healthcare professionals?
Yeah, I think this is an interesting question. I think, we've always pitched ourselves as we're not healthcare workers, we're friends and family of healthcare workers. So we understand what it means to be in this profession, in this line of work, but we're not actively doing it. I think, you know, from the beginning, it was always the goal to really highlight the realities of what it means to work in healthcare. Um, it's not like any other job, right? The highs are really high and the lows are really low, and we've kind of seen that through our own family and friends. Especially during the pandemic, I think finally people were understanding and seeing that, like, this is a hard job and it's different from other jobs, and this is kind of a unique population. So I think that is kind of really the basis for everything that we do is sort of that understanding of of the uniqueness of healthcare. And that's kind of how we put everything together, our brand campaigns, our marketing. We only use real healthcare workers in our photo shoots, right? We are very thoughtful about, what we put out in our social channels and our advertising, knowing that we want to tell the real story of what it means to be a healthcare worker, right? Like certainly during the pandemic, sharing people's stories, but even today, right? What is it about, this kind of working environment that is different, and kind of appreciating, acknowledging, and celebrating that, because it's not always easy to be a healthcare worker, and so we've always been very upfront about that, in our advertising and our brand storytelling, and all of that. And I think healthcare workers really appreciate that kind of authenticity.
Um, I imagine targeting such a specific segment of an audience, their feedback might have influenced the product development quite a bit. Can you think of any examples of like some specific examples like this happened and the product changed like this?
Yeah, I mean, this is like uh, uh, our bread and butter. We are obsessed with customer insights. So I mentioned we're very data driven. We have an entire customer insights function. So there's literally dedicated employees whose entire job it is to just talk to customers. And Joe and I actively go to focus groups and take customer calls because we want to get that direct feedback. We read reviews. Like both of us take time out of our schedules to make sure that we're kind of maintaining that active connection with the customer. So every single color that we produce gets shown to at least two focus groups. And we go all across the country. So this summer we're going to be in Chicago and Minneapolis. I'll be at those focus groups. So we are directly interacting with the customer. We're showing them new products. We're getting their direct feedback on, well, what do you think about this new design? What do you like about it? What do you not like about it? And then we make changes accordingly. So we're showing a new product in a focus group, and somebody was like, what about if you change these laces and you do a flat lace instead of a round lace? I was like, that's a great idea. So I immediately went to our factory, our supplier, said, okay, can we supply this component, and can we change this? It's going to work better. So I think that to us has been really key and very important, making sure that we remain connected to that customer, that we understand what their needs are, and as their needs evolve too. We've made lots of changes to the original product. I think there's tons of examples. We had the original collar cuff was a little high, and so folks were telling us, oh, it's digging into my ankle, so we cut that lower. We've changed kind of the lace keeper, the button holder. People are saying, oh, it's a little bit hard to use this one. Like, can you make one that's a little bit more accessible? And so we've gone down that road and made lots of product changes based on feedback. And I think that's important. Recognizing that while you might have a great product, it's not a perfect product. And so being very respectful of your customer and receptive to feedback, I think is really, really important. But yeah, our focus groups are awesome. It's so fun to get to meet our customers and hear what they have to say. And they always have the best tidbits for us. So we learn a lot that way.
Paul, I wanted to talk about positioning a little bit. Am I noticing a little bit widened positioning here when I'm checking out the website? I notice it. There's the super cushion everything. Is it kind of like,
Various.
hey, if it's good enough, if it's comfortable enough for a healthcare worker, it's definitely comfortable enough for you, kind of a thing? Is it a
Yeah.
little bit more broad now?
Yeah. I mean, so I think it's very timely to kind of have this discussion. So I think, we've already talked about healthcare workers are shoe super users. We've created a product for them that they love, that they're very happy with. And so it's certainly something that has broad market applications. Even already, 10-15% of our customers are non-healthcare workers. They're folks that have heard about us through their healthcare friends and family. Maybe they've seen an ad. They're a retiree that needs a comfortable shoe. It's a teacher that's on their feet. It's a police officer. So we have all kinds of people that are already buying our shoes. And I think, as we kind of head into this next year, one of our kind of strategic goals has been sort of rolling out some channel diversification. So we've just started now to kind of enter into wholesale, knowing that our healthcare customers accessing our product there, but also, there's kind of a broader audience there as well. So kind of speaking to some of those folks and seeing if we can kind of broaden our aperture a little bit, while still maintaining kind of our healthcare roots and the functional technical benefits of the product, but also acknowledging that there's applications for other people too. I mean, I wear my clothes 365 days a year, as do I think a lot of people in my family. Folks that aren't healthcare workers wear them too. So yeah, I think when you've made a really great product, I think getting it in the hands of more people is always beneficial.
Yeah, I noticed some other specialized like wide fit. So that would be for me because I always struggle with comfort because of that like wide fit. Not a lot of brands offer that, right?
Yeah.
There's a exclusively for students collection now. What I wanted to ask, I was kind of going through different collections and I'm just noticing it a lot of different colors and styles and looks really nice and cool and well designed. And I was thinking like, how does this kind of reconcile with the functionality? Like, it did it begin in the beginning? Okay, it just really needs to be functional and deliver comfort to healthcare workers. And did it kind of evolve over time a little bit to make it a little bit more stylish? And like, how do you balance style and functionality in your product? And why is that balance important for your target market?
Yeah, so I think this is an interesting question. So we've talked a lot about the product design and how that's been absolutely key for us. I think at the same time, while the functionality is like the most important thing, I think we've always thought of it also as a fashion brand, as bringing design thinking and style to what is a functional product. That's always kind of been the goal from the outset. I think if you look at the sort of the demographics of healthcare, you get a lot of people who want to look good at work. They want to be wearing something nice, something's cute, but it's also technical and functional. So I think the hierarchy is number one, it has to meet the needs, the sort of technical needs. So it has to be comfortable, it has to be easy to clean, it has to be non-slip. Like all of that stuff is non-negotiable. But I think beyond that, adding the style is sort of how we differentiate ourselves, because there are obviously other waterproof non-slip shoes out there, but what they maybe aren't is quite as cute. And so that's always been very important from the beginning. And if you think about healthcare as kind of this microcosm, we've already sort of talked about everybody's working in the same environment. And not only that, but very often they're all wearing the same color scrubs. So you walk into a hospital and everybody's wearing navy blue scrubs. How do you differentiate yourself? How do you show your personality and kind of tell a story about who you are if you're all wearing the same thing? And so we've kind of always from the very beginning had the plan to offer fun limited edition colors, stuff that's loud, maybe pastels for people that like them, right? So taking kind of that fashion aspect and incorporating it into the shoe, I think has been huge, and a big differentiator. And if you talk to our customers, a lot of them will know, oh, the exact, their exact specific favorite colorway. Or it's funny, we launched a shoe, at this point, it was 4 years ago. It was a limited edition numbered holographic shoe. And I will still encounter customers who can tell me like what number pair they had. So there's this kind of this collection building aspect around it, and this idea of curating a wardrobe and this ability to show your personality outside and beyond just kind of the practicality of the shoe. At the end of the day, it is a tool that they're using, but it's also a way for them to express themselves.
I, I'm really interested in just niche brand concepts, not just brands, but just like any type of niche products. And there's a common wisdom out there that hey, just like nail this vertical first, and then you can expand into other verticals. And well, easier said than done, right? So like, you know, people usually who dish out that advice haven't done it themselves, and you know. I'd love to hear from you. I mean, like you have a brand that started as niche. It looks like there are some new ideas here now. Like, what are some of the challenges that you've faced in the past few years as a DTC brand in a niche market, and like how did you overcome them?
Yeah, I mean, I think scaling is always difficult, no matter what. So I mean, we've certainly benefited from knowing where our customers are, right? So knowing their physical addresses of all the healthcare locations and having them in close proximity, and so that creates a network effect. And so early days, we sold our first 250,000 pairs on pre-order. So it was almost 2 years, and the supply chain constraints during the pandemic. And so essentially we would pre-list shoes and then we'd ship them like a month later when they finally arrived. And so we could see and track very clearly that when we would ship a container of shoes, we'd have a spike in sales 2, 3 days later as they kind of worked their way out and people saw them and talked about them and said, oh, this thing's great. So I think early days that really helped with scaling, and then obviously digital marketing spend, but having kind of that word of mouth and sort of the networking. I think the changes in iOS 14 have made it difficult, not just for us, but for a lot of brands to kind of access the consumer in the same way that we used to on digital channels. But I think that's kind of helped drive some of our sort of channel diversification, broadening our aperture and our lens, right? So we kind of already talked about wholesale as a huge opportunity. We looked at other really successful footwear brands like Hoka and On Running, and we realized that they're doing more than half of their business is in-person retail. And it makes sense when you think about something like a shoe. People want to see it, touch it, hold it, try it on. And so that was kind of a big driver in us, making the move into wholesale, both to pursue scale, but also to kind of channel diversify, knowing that we would encounter new customers there as well. And so I think you have to be creative, but scaling a business is hard. There's no right way or wrong way or easy answer. You kind of have to figure out what works, and what used to work might not always work, and so you have to remain flexible and kind of willing to adapt.
One thing you said got me really, really curious. You said physical proximity. So it actually kind of blew my mind. Uh, that kind of thing is a reason to start a company, in my view. Like the fact that, like, why would this work? The network effect that can be built. These are where the hospitals are. You can target people who, and then because everybody kind of sees and creates word of mouth, right? So that is like a growth loop that
And we've used it.
did you well, you didn't pick it like that because your family and friends were in the business, but
No, but
I
we
can
knew.
imagine picking this just for that reason.
No, we knew that there was that effect because we had seen it. So my family and friends were all buying fig scrubs. I'm sure you've heard of them. That's another example, and they're kind of a company that will also sort of crack this code of realizing like healthcare workers want to look good at work. They don't want to be wearing big baggy scrubs, and so we knew that if we got this product in the hands of people, that there would be it was in our original pitch deck. We said, this is an environment where healthcare workers are they have the highest bullshit detector of anybody, right? So you cannot lie to them. You cannot, right? Like they know, and so they trust a recommendation that comes from a friend, right? We have probably the most highly educated customer base of any company in America, right? Like these are folks that really they have a high bar, and so knowing that a friend likes this product is going to go a huge way in kind of helping that sort of adoption curve and adoption cycle. And so we knew from the very outset, just based on Tamara's experience, right? Like she would go into her clinic and, somebody would have, at the time it was like a Hydro Flask water bottle, and then suddenly the entire clinic would have it, right? So we knew there was this effect, and we knew that if we got the product right and built a really authentic brand that celebrated healthcare, that we could kind of tap into that network effect.
Do you do any collabs? Have we seen, or will we see Clove shoes in like Grey's Anatomy or something like that?
Oh, we just did. I can't say too much on that. We did. We did. At one point, talk to them. I think it doesn't necessarily make sense. I mean, if you think of who's consuming that show, as we always say, healthcare workers are everywhere, and so it's not just, you can't think of them as one sort of homogenous pool, because they're not. They're representative of the sort of whole population, right? They've got different interests and different hobbies and all of that stuff. I think we just did a collaboration. I was talking about water bottles. We just did a collaboration with Awala, which is a water bottle company, and that went over like gangbusters. It was crazy. We got so much traffic to the site. It was like Black Friday level of traffic. And it was really cool because they've obviously got a diverse set of consumers, not just nurses. So it was fun to see, folks that had never consume the brand before come to the website and buy a water bottle and shoes. So we've done that. We've done, we've done other sort of, brand partnerships. But that was kind of a co-branded collaboration, and we've actually done an influencer shoe as well. So we kind of followed the Nike model of having a key person do a shoe collaboration. So we've done some of that, and I think going forward, it's going to be a very important piece of. We were talking about kind of a broad audience. I think that's going to be a very important piece of it, is kind of collaborating with some of these more broad audience brands that can potentially kind of widen our aperture a little bit.
Well, why do you think that collab with the water bottle company drove Black Friday level traffic? Why do you think it worked so well?
I mean, I think they're a company, I think, that has a rabid following, right? And so I think having the right brand partner and putting together a product that people are excited about, right? I think we had this really beautiful looking water bottle. Folks saw it and they were super stoked to come to the site and buy it. So I think that was a perfect example of lots of nurses have this water bottle. Lots of nurses love Clove, and so kind of marrying those two together made all the sense in the world. And so, I think a successful partnership has to work for both parties, and I think that was a perfect example of something where, the brands fit well together. The consumers, knew and understood and appreciated both brands, and so it was kind of the magic sauce of a great brand partnership, where we're bringing their product to a new audience and they're bringing our product to a new audience, and yet there's still that connective tissue between us.
Mm. You mentioned nurses. So, do you also do nurse influencer collabs? And if you do, like, how do you pick them? What's your criteria?
Yeah, so we call it the Clove Collective. We've got an amazing cadre of healthcare professionals in our collective, not just nurses, but doctors, dentists, veterinarians. Veterinary is a huge market for us, and the funniest way I heard it described was from a vet who said, it's very important that I can clean my shoes because I don't know when my patients can't tell me when they're going to throw up. Unlike human patients who, I guess, presumably in most cases can. So that always made me laugh. But yeah, we have these amazing, amazing folks. I think our criteria, so to speak, is really just. I mean, we're not completely focused on like what's your follower count. And, it's more about your engagement and what are you about? What kind of platform do you have? And does that align with our brand ethos? And so we have lots of folks in our collective that are absolutely amazing individuals. They're not necessarily huge influencers, but they're people that we really respect, and we want to be kind of these brand ambassadors and brand representatives. And so early days, that was huge for us, kind of having that circle of trust, because I think certainly within healthcare there were at that time 5, 6 kind of really key people that we worked with early on that I think really brought a lot of trust and authenticity to the brand. So one of those was Nurse Clara, who I mentioned we did a brand collaboration with, and it was funny when we were first kind of starting Clove. Joe and I were looking and thinking, okay, well, what is this influencer program going to look like, and who's like somebody we really want to work with? And he actually found Clara and was like, oh, she's amazing. At the time, she was a nursing student. She had a following, and we were like, wouldn't it be great if we could ever work with her? And then sure enough, we ended up launching a shoe with her 2 or 3 years later, which is kind of insane when I think about it, kind of that progression. So I'd say it's been an important part of our strategy, especially early on, to kind of bring some trust to the brand and making sure that we're working with the right people. It was very important too.
Looking back, what's the one thing that you wish you had known when you first started Clove, and how would that knowledge have changed your approach?
How much time do you have? I could write a book. I mean, I think the thing I wish I would have known is that you're not always going to have the right answers, or necessarily know where to find them. There's a lot of, I mean, I think coming as an investor, I had this mindset of like, okay, there's a right answer. There's a right price to pay. There's a right entrepreneur to back. There's like, it's a little, it's black and white. I think the reality with entrepreneurship is it's not. It's really a grayscale. And so your job as the entrepreneur is to figure out, okay, here's this problem that I have to solve. How am I going to approach it? And what's the ultimate decision that I'm going to make, knowing that you're probably not going to get it right. and being comfortable with that. And so, we have so many amazing entrepreneurs in our network, and we'd call them and ask them for, right, what do you think we should do about this? And one person would say one thing, another person would say another thing. And it's like, well, at the end of the day, there's not necessarily a correct answer, right? It's your job as an entrepreneur to kind of trust your gut, right? Go out, do the research, talk to people, get the advice, but then at the end of the day, you're the one that has to make the call. So being comfortable with that kind of uncertainty, and knowing that there may not be a perfect answer, right? There's what you thought was the right answer at the time. But yeah, Joe and I don't engage in a lot of coulda, shoulda, woulda, because it's just not productive. It's like, if only we had done this. And it's like, well, we didn't have perfect information at the time, and so knowing that you're going to fail, and having that understanding early on, I think is very important. Of just like, okay, I made the best decision that I could make, and maybe it wasn't the perfect decision, but yeah. So
Yeah.
that would be my advice. And the other piece of advice I would give, and I think this is true as you're dealing with third parties, is kind of more of a practical piece of advice. Don't get sucked into the hype. I think as founders, fundamentally, we are storytellers, right? And so we love a good story, and we love something that makes sense. And so, there's been so many instances of where we've had a third party, somebody that we're potentially going to work with, maybe it's a vendor, and we just get so enamored with the story that they're telling us, and then that doesn't end up lining up with reality. So I think, being a little skeptical of what people are saying, because I'll be the first to admit that, who doesn't love a great kind of narrative around, well, here's all the things we can do, and then the reality ends up being very different. So that would be my other piece of advice. To hear
Paula,
you.
what are your top two headaches right now?
Oh man. I think. Hmm. So I think as we're kind of moving into wholesale, kind of getting that all set up is been challenging, but in kind of a good way. It's like sort of flexing a different muscle for the team. So I've been really amazed with how the rollout has gone, and how we're sort of figuring this all out, and setting it up, and competing with these much larger brands that have a whole infrastructure. So that's been kind of an interesting new challenge, less of a headache, more of a challenge. Trying to think what else. Oh, the freight market is like a forever headache. So freight prices are starting to go back up. They're not quite at like pandemic levels, but that's one where it's just like there's nothing you can do about it, and it's frustrating, and it definitely gives me a headache. So those are kind of my two areas of focus, and
Well,
one
tied
I
to
can
that,
control, the other
we're
I can't really.
a little past halfway through the year. What are the top two priorities looking to nail by the end of 2024?
Yeah, I mean, I think we've kind of talked about them already, right? So it's making sure that our wholesale rollout goes smoothly, which so far it has. I mean, it's very different servicing kind of B2B than it is a consumer. So we're having to kind of set up new processes, new marketing materials, training up sales staff on how to talk about our product, changing our packaging. There's a lot of things that have kind of gone into that. So we're really focused this year on making sure that we execute that well, that our brand partners are happy, and that they're going to go to the other specialty sneaker stores in their network and say, hey, these guys are great to work with, like, you should stock them. So I think that's one priority that we have. I think the second is figuring out how we talk to a broader audience, and so we have some really good initial work, and kind of feedback on how we're going to roll that out. I think as you're kind of transitioning from more of a niche into more of a broad market, it's really focusing on, well, what is the value that we bring, right? We are not a peak performance brand. We are not Nike. We are not Hoka. You're not going to go out and run a marathon in the shoe, right? But really, what it is a amazing, comfortable tool that if you bring it into your daily life, right, you're going to enjoy wearing the product, right? You're going to, be able to go on a walk, and take your dog out, and do all these kind of things that you do in your normal life, and do it in a comfortable, stylish way, right? And that's always kind of been our pitch. We're not trying to help you run the fastest marathon, right? We're trying to get you through your day. So kind of thinking about how we're going to talk to that new consumer has been probably our next biggest challenge.
Paula, thank you for joining me.
It's been so fun. Thank you. This is an amazing set of questions, I have to say. I've done a
Thank you.
few of these, and this is one of the more thoughtful question sets. So I really appreciate your time.